Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр ороо манай нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Deborah Kan буюу Reuters мэдээллийн агентлагийн сурвалжлагч оролцож байна.
Thomson Reuters Asia телевизийн хөтлөгч, сурвалжлагч Deborah Kan. Тэрээр 10 гаруй жилийн турш сэтгүүлч мэргэжлэр ажилласан Wall Street Journal, Fox News Channel зэрэг хэвлэл мэдээллийн хэрэгслүүдэд сурвалжлагчаар ажиллаж байсан. Deborah Kanтай ярилцсан нэртэй телевизийн нэвтрүүлэгт нь дэлхийн бизнес улс төрийн удирдагч нар оролцож байсан. Одоогоор Reuters телевизэд хөтлөгчөөр ажиллаж байна. Нью-Йоркийн Филармонтой хамт Умар Солонгосын нийслэл Пекинийн хот руу аялсан цорын ганц Аз сэтгүүлч болсон.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming to this program.
Thank you for having me.
You have been working as a journalist for quite some time and being also on Asia News, right?
Star News Asia.
Yeah, and you had your own anchor program.
Yes.
Yeah, interview with Deborah Kan.
Yeah, Talk with Deborah Kan.
Talk with Deborah. Please tell us about this time when you were working in this famous channel, which is reaching many thousands, millions of families throughout Asia.
That's right, and I heard that you could see it in Mongolia
Yes,
as well.
Yes.
I started at Star 2006. Actually, let me take that back. I was hired in '98 to launch the news, and I was there for about a year before I had to move to London because my husband's job took us to London. And then I came back in 2003 and went back to Star and worked there as an anchor and also developed this talk segment where I would have guests much like you do on and built that really from the ground up.
You have been, what's your education in journalism or in communication?
Actually, I was an English literature major. I always loved to read and write, so I was an English major.
Where you have studied?
I studied in the U.S. I grew up in the U.S. And I studied for my at the University of California for my undergrad, and then I did a broadcast journalism program at Stanford University, which taught me a lot about the essentials of journalism.
What do you like the most about this profession of journalists?
You know, I'm often asked that, and I think 100% the fact that I get to meet different people and learn new things every day. It never gets boring.
Exactly.
And so I interview someone who is a scientist and I learn about science, you know, and interview someone about their business and you learn what makes their business tick, and it's very interesting.
What was your talk with you about in general, or what was the main profile of the program?
Well, the Talk with Deborah Kan was a program where we tried to identify key people in Asia who might be very famous in their own countries, but you might not necessarily know about. So for example, I would go to the Philippines and I would interview everyone from a politician to one of their most famous movie actresses.
Who became a president as well.
Yeah, well, him too.
Estrada.
Yes, Estrada, that's true. I did go to the palace and interview Estrada. But the idea was to capture a lot of different people in society who you wouldn't necessarily know about, but it gave you an indication about what life was like in that country.
And extraordinary individuals who made their own changes, right?
Yeah, and then we would have people like Al Gore, you know, people come through Hong Kong, and when they did, I would also interview them. So it was really not any, I mean, everyone from politicians to movie stars.
You have you are one of the few journalists who had visited Pyongyang, North Korea.
That's right.
With New York Philharmonic Orchestra. Tell us about this trip.
That was an incredible opportunity where I was the only Asian station television journalist. So we were traveling with, the bulk was American press, and we flew into Pyongyang with the Philharmonic. And that was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life. When we descended upon Pyongyang, it was exactly what you would think it how you would imagine it. It was very cold. It was in the heart of winter, very gray, and very Soviet-like.
Which year?
We were there in 2008, in February, I think
Very
it was.
cold
So
winter.
yeah, it was cold. It was very cold, and the buildings are very, very Soviet style with the gray uniform rows of buildings. And we went there, and it was, I always find myself when I'm in a different location, I want to know as much as possible. I want to talk to as many people as possible. And in North Korea, that's not always possible because you have a minder. And my minder in particular was very strict and said to me, Deborah, when we move in groups, because I kept, straying away from the groups. And in North Korea, it's very controlled about what you can see and what you can't.
Music is something that can go across the borders, even through different political systems. So what do you think what kind of impact was that Philharmonic presentation in that country?
Do you know what the most amazing thing to see was? We had a day where the Philharmonic musicians went to a local music school in North Korea, in Pyongyang, and they had about a 2 or 3 hour session, and a cello player would be matched with a cello student, etc. And it really broke down so many barriers at that time too. And you just saw how pleased the students were to learn from the musicians at the Philharmonic, and how happy the members of the Philharmonic were to be there. And it really made me realize that music has no boundaries. It doesn't matter what's going on in a country, it has no boundaries.
You had also another very interesting page in your journalist's history, chronicles, I would say. You had interviewed Hun Sen, the Prime Minister of Cambodia.
Yes.
How was it about that?
That was really also a very eye-opening experience for me, because I had done some work, but I had interviewed a woman who ran an orphanage in Cambodia. And Hun Sen was very proud of the work that she was doing inside Cambodia, and said to her, if you can pick one international journalist who I will conduct an interview with at your orphanage, but that's the only condition. We had to do it on the grounds of the orphanage. And that was Hun Sen's way of really trying to bring attention to the work that Geraldine was doing at the orphanage. It's called the Sunrise Children's Village. So we got to the orphanage, and I have to admit, I had a preconceived notion of what I thought Hun Sen would be like because of what I had read in the media. And I left realizing that you cannot judge somebody without really understanding the circumstances. So for example, we were at the orphanage, and the local press was there, and he had a photo op with the kids where, they filmed and took pictures of him. And then it was my turn to take him out onto this balcony, and we did the interview together. After the interview was over, most politicians would be whisked off and just leave after that. But he said stop to his minders, and he sat down on the grass and he spoke to the children at the orphanage for about 45 minutes. And it really, I think Hun Sen, people can say what they want to say about him, but I really believe that he wants to do what's best for the future of the country right now. And perhaps the preconceived notions I had about him, I cannot apply my own world to his, because Hun Sen was a victim of the Khmer Rouge. He was forced to be a soldier, and then he escaped to Vietnam, and he was reinstated to fight the Khmer Rouge. And so he suffered under the Khmer Rouge a lot, as did other people. He lost family members, etc. And so I decided at that moment as a journalist that you really have to put yourself in the shoes of the person, and you cannot impose your own judgment because it's different.
So that's why you have visited that country several times after and following what's going on?
I've been back, and I have a special relationship with an orphanage down there where, I have met some of the children. We brought 2 of the children up to Hong Kong for medical care, and that's what really takes me back there a lot. Yeah.
Obviously, those changes happening in that young country is really impressive now. and hope the people in Cambodia are living way better than even Khmer Rouge time and later on, right?
Yes, I think that they are. I think it's a new era for them because they've never had this much stability in life. It's just, it's their first real decade of stability, which is good for the country.
You have been selected and sent to 1996 U.S. presidential election.
Yes.
President when President Clinton was re-elected, right?
Yes.
And then you have visited with President Clinton China, 96, 15 years ago?
Yes.
How was it, and what do you think about China?
Well, back then it was really interesting because it was the first. It was Clinton's first visit to China, I believe, and we went to Guilin, which was, in China. It's a really picturesque part of China, and what was interesting to me about that trip was the Chinese people who saw him. It was like he was a rock star. You know, if you've ever met Clinton, he has incredible charisma, and go with him places, and there would be hordes of Chinese, especially women, just screaming like he was a rock star, ah!
All right.
And so it was really funny to see, but he's a very charismatic person.
You have been, what topic, mostly people or economy or culture in Asia you are particularly working with?
I think it's all related to be, I've come to Mongolia and I've talked to so many different people. I think economy is very much related to the people. So if you get to know the people, you'll understand more about the economy and where it's going.
You were also elected or nominated or selected as one of the young global leader by the World Economic Forum.
That's right.
And that's one of your group came here and you are here, right?
That's right. That's one reason.
How it happened?
That was actually quite a surprise because someone who I knew said, I want to nominate you to be a young global leader. And at that time, I thought, oh, okay, go ahead. But, I'm probably not the right candidate. I didn't really understand that the group was as diverse as it is. And I said, okay, go ahead. And before I knew it, I received this envelope in the mail saying you've been selected. And that has opened so many great, I have made friends, I've made interview contacts. It is just such a dynamic group of people from all over the world who you wouldn't normally get to meet, who you meet, So it puts you in the room. And it's truly, I think, what the World Economic Forum is trying to accomplish, in that if you get people together who wouldn't normally necessarily meet, a lot of synergy is created and things come from that.
That's what is about happening in this country.
Yes.
We have been honored to receive several of you, but maybe 20, 30 young people. And it was very impressive meeting them. You have met several Mongolian leaders here, ordinary people, those who is making news. Tell us about your impression about Mongolia.
My impression about Mongolia is, before I came here, I thought, I've been to many developing countries in Asia, and I thought, it's going to be, it will fall into that category of developing countries. And what distinguishes Mongolia apart from other places, in my opinion, is I believe that the people are very business savvy. And so although the country and the economy is developing and there are areas that need to be developed, I have been struck by the professionalism and the savviness of the business people here on the ground. And I think that's one thing that people probably miscalculate. They think developing nation, we'll go in there, we'll invest, we'll do things our way, but they don't take in mind that the people on the ground are doing a pretty good job.
Okay, thank you. What do you think in the way now businesses run, obviously our infrastructure, city and the smoke, there are so many things to improve. And at the meeting of media, we have been talking about media, its freedom and the role of media in development of this country, etc. Then you said a very interesting remark, which is truly independent media must be transparent in terms of ownership, right?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I think the way that it's been described, and that comment was in reaction to if I thought, how Mongolia could have a truly free press. And in my opinion, I know there's a lot of news outlets here. You have many, over 30 TV stations and many, many more newspapers. And if people who own the stations are not forthcoming and they don't, and they say, oh, I own this station, then you wonder why they own them. And if if in fact people are starting media outlets as an agenda for their business or for personal or political or what have you. And in my opinion, unless there's complete transparency within the industry, it will be very hard to have a free press, because that is one of the reasons why I believe you have so many outlets. It's if people are forced to declare, this is my station, then that emphasis of like having an agenda in order, a media outlet to get a personal word or message out, I think that will disappear.
Is it sort of a legal requirement in certain countries?
Transparency within the media, definitely, and
yes.
especially if it's a public company.
Media is becoming public anyway.
Yeah.
Public anyway.
Yeah.
Who is coming and reaching public? They impact on their interests, right?
Yes.
And if there is a particular law to your mind, if there is in a particular country that says specifically that.
Well, I think in the U.S. we know, who owns what, as in Hong Kong and in most Western countries, you know who's behind the media. It's not a secret, And what strikes me about Mongolia is I've heard many people in the media say that, they think this particular newspaper or television station is owned by a certain business person, but they're not sure. So
with this transparency, then it comes also with the actual financial statement, etc., other things, because it used to be regarded as almost as a bank or something like public company.
No, I don't think it has to be a public company, but I think media on every degree should be as transparent as possible. And if it's not, if you don't know who owns your station or who owns your newspaper, then you don't know. And my question would be, if you're a business person and you're going to invest or start a media outlet, why don't you want people to know who you are? Is it because you have something to hide?
Now you are working now with Thomson and Reuters.
Yes.
What do you do?
I am a presenter, an anchor, and a correspondent for Reuters Insider, which is a financial news channel and multimedia outlet for financial professionals.
Being one of the largest media agency, right?
Yes.
Thomson Reuters together, it's not only outlet also, but all type of means of sending information in, I think. How many people do they work in Reuters?
I probably can't give you that figure because there's so many. We have bureaus on the editorial side. We have bureaus all over the world. We have thousands of people in New York, in London. I mean, it's a very big organization.
What is the principles that drive Reuters being different and being a reference for many news agencies?
Yes. So at Reuters, ethics are the number one priority. Yes. And so there are very, very strict codes of ethics. For example, if I were to say something that someone didn't really say, or if I didn't have a legitimate source, that would be a reason to lose my job. So the code of ethics is the number one thing when you work for an organization like Reuters, because we are providing information to be disseminated all over the world. And if we do not give an accurate, ethical, way of disseminating the information, then that would affect the media in the entire world.
What happens if you need to have a confidential source?
That's okay. If you have a confidential source, the rule usually is for the tech side. I'm not on the tech side, but I know the rules. If you have a confidential source, you need two. So you need two people to tell you, or you can say, you could say a source told me, right? But in order to go with a particular story, if it's shaping the angle of your story, you need two sources.
Mm-hmm. What's your take on the recent scandal in the UK with news?
With News Corp, what are you
Yes.
talking about? That is something that we were really interested in because there you could see the lines were crossed. But clearly, with News Corp, somebody somewhere was not doing the right thing, and it caught up with them. And unfortunately, I think for the company, it escalated to a point where it got too far too quickly. So what should have happened was the phone tapping is not ethical, right? So that they should have not proceeded with that. But one area was obviously proceeding with it, and by the time people caught on to what was happening, it was almost too late because too much had happened.
Unfortunately, yeah, with such a large source, it's happening.
But that's also dangerous too when you have such a large company, because and especially a company like News Corp, because they own so many different media organizations, and Murdoch is very. I believe Murdoch is quite dynamic in his decisions, and he's a good businessman, But when things go wrong, it was almost too late, I think.
What will happen, say, a journalist was writing because he was ordered to write about somebody, positive or negative? What will be the legal consequences in countries like England or Hong Kong?
You mean if somebody was commissioned to write
Yes.
something, but for a news organization?
Yeah, for particular, say, he was paid to do that.
Well,
And we discovered later maybe the information he disseminated was not very correct.
Right.
But we found out it was the job that he was ordered to do or booked to do, paid for.
so the company is paying its staff to just do something.
Or
that they
even
got
somebody from outside, say, even.
Oh, so somebody said, "I'll pay you if you
Yes.
write a favorable article."
Yes.
Yeah.
Or unfavorable article.
Or unfavorable. I think, I think the general rule is that a reporter must be as unbiased as possible. They should not be receiving any payment from anyone, except the company, of course, in order to write something. And when you do a story, you may have a particular opinion about something, but it is your responsibility to get the other side. And it's not really our role to decide whether or not we like someone or not. It's more our role to give an unbiased presentation of something for the reader to decide. And but you see biases in the media all the time. Unfortunately, it's inevitable. But in terms of the code of ethics, our job is really to present both sides of the story.
And I'm just wondering sometimes why so many media companies are based in Hong Kong.
That's a good question. Are there? Relative to the other, I think you mean the international media organizations.
Yes.
I think historically Hong Kong has always been an important place for business. I think before '97 there was this intrigue with Hong Kong because it was pre-handover. We were still under the British rule.
You were living there at that time?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
there. Yeah, I was.
And you were planning to leave Hong Kong?
No, I wasn't planning on leaving. It was a really exciting time to be a journalist because no one really knew what was going to happen, how drastic the changes would be. And I think actually at that time, in the run up to the handover, what we suffered from in Hong Kong, a lot of the local media stations would self-censor their reporters because they were worried if they said anything too harsh against China, then it would catch up with them. And that, of course, didn't happen. I mean, it's still a very free press. But I think the anxiety came because if you think about the older generation in Hong Kong, they fled China during the Cultural Revolution. So that is still at the that's still in their minds, that's still in their memories. And so in anticipation, it was almost like the anticipation to the handover was worse than when it actually happened.
I have seen every journalist, international media, living and working in Hong Kong, they usually very efficient, productive, use particular gadget tools, etc. So what is your tools to use?
Oh, my tools. Well, you mean when I'm out in a
Yes.
story? I can't live without my iPad, as I see you have one too, you know. That's my main. I mean, I think the iPad is the greatest invention because I have, you know, I read about 6 papers a day and I have it all right there, and then I can take my notes on my iPad. So that's in the last year I don't leave home without my iPad.
You can send it immediately.
Yeah, and I can send it too.
You said 6 major newspapers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of work.
It is, but I mean, it's the iPad has made me so efficient because I sit there and I have my papers and I can shuffle back and forth, you know. And a lot of times, being a news junkie, I like to see how different people are covering the same story. So I like to read about one, you know, I'll read about Libya and then I'll switch to the next one and next one and see what the different take is. So
I think being the journalist, what you do now for Reuters is making very helpful news for insider, true, very in-depth news for investors to make
That's
particular
right.
decisions, right?
yes.
And then probably your work in Mongolia, looking at inside what is the political instability or stability,
Yes.
what's really going with transparency,
Yes.
right? What is your take, what is your feeling about that to your readers today, about Mongolia and its governance, its mining wealth coming, and all these things, what's happening?
Well, my take is that there is inevitably, I mean, it's already starting, but there is going to be an explosion of growth in Mongolia. There's just, you know, everyone from investment bankers, you know, to
Yes.
hedge fund people, they are already here and eager to get a piece of the pie
Yes.
here. There is enormous potential in this country due to its resources, but it's also juggling a very delicate balance between a nomad population which lives off the land and really speeding up its economy through resources. And
True.
I think if I had to say what my biggest fear is that Mongolia is putting all of its eggs in one basket, you know, and
Into mining.
commodities is such a volatile
Yes.
place in terms of investment. I mean, you can make a lot of money and you can lose a lot of money. So should there be a fluctuation in commodity prices,
Yes.
I would worry that Mongolia, you know, could be harmed.
So what is the best, in your opinion, that Mongolians can do in order to avoid this problem of?
I think diversification of the economy is key. I think that the problem here is you're dealing with a low population base. So something like manufacturing, you know, you don't have the population base to make
That can support the
yeah,
large
that can
ones
support
go.
it. So I think, and I think the government is aware of this, but I think diversification needs to happen. So maybe diversifying in industries that can support mining, but can also be, you know, carried out into other things. You know, so for example, I'm not sure this is the right answer, but like, you know, maybe if you make your own steel, you know, you have the raw materials, but maybe if you start a plant to make the steel,
Further process it.
yeah, so something like that. I think you know, the government has, while it's developing the mining section, needs to simultaneously find ways, other industries that Mongolia can get rich off of, so it's not all going to
That's
one
what we are looking for,
Yeah.
and we have a nationwide, all around at all levels, different discussions about what is that industry where it can compensate the possible risks in the mining industry. Before the end of the program, through a personal question, I always ask about you look very fitness. What do you do, and how do you combine with all this busyness of your time?
I'm a running, jogging fanatic. I have to run, otherwise I can't function during the day.
How much you run?
I run 1 hour every morning.
Wow.
So I get up very early. I have 3 children.
Wow.
And so I get up before my children wake up. So I
5
get up
o'clock.
at 5 a.m. I read the papers thanks to my iPad, I have all my papers now. And then I'm out the door usually running about 6 a.m. and I run for an hour. Yeah. And then I go to work.
Wake up at 5 and working, 6 a.m. running, and 7 o'clock back to wake up children.
Yeah. Well, the children are already awake, so I have about a half an hour with them before they go to school.
Wow, what a hard work, and
Yeah.
still you combine it.
Yeah. So actually, when I go on work trips, it's quite relaxing because I don't have the kids and the, you know.
probably this wonderful infrastructure in Hong Kong also enables you to do that. So
Exactly. I always said that I'm so lucky to live in Hong Kong because I'm not sure I could do all of this in other places.
I wish our Mongolian ladies have this infrastructure and this sort of energy and possibility that you have in Hong Kong.
They will soon.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with your Reuters and the news about Mongolia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.